Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. And today, continuing our series on the brand new head coaches that were hired during this entire offseason. And today, we are going to the northwest part of the country to take a look at Washington and their hire of Jimmy Lake, a guy that, unless you're a Washington fan, maybe you haven't heard of. But before we dive into Jimmy Lake and his background and what to expect from him and the Huskies in 2020, we have to look at how we got here. Why did Washington have to hire a brand new head coach? Well, first off, it's because Chris Petersen shocked the nation by announcing he was stepping down at the conclusion of the 2019 season. No one really saw Chris Petersen retiring or leaving the Washington program. And we're seeing more and more of that now. More coaches, both in the NFL and college ranks, are stepping down not because of poor performances, not because of any scandals, because of health reasons, because they want to spend more time with their family. Reasons that I do not blame these coaches for stepping down, but definitely reasons and decisions that do shock the entire nation, especially coming from a guy in Chris Petersen here that has been one of the greatest coaches of about the previous 2 decades. He thrived at Boise State, putting the Broncos on the map, winning big game after big game, and he came over to Washington. No one really thought he'd ever lead the Broncos, but he did. He came over to a Power 5 school, and just like he did at Boise State, made them a national power, made them relevant, and thrived there. His tenure at Washington ending in the Chris Petersen Bowl, only fitting that he was coaching the Huskies in his final game, going up against Boise State, his previous school. And of course, he went out with a bang, defeating his previous school in Boise State 38-7 in that Las Vegas Bowl. He finished his career at Washington with a 55-26 record, including an appearance in the college football playoff, finishing his entire career with a 147-38 overall record. That is absolutely ridiculous. That record right there is absolutely ridiculous. One of the greatest winning percentages of a head coach of all time. Chris Petersen, an absolutely legendary head coach, one that had to leave the ranks way too soon. But when he did that, and luckily he did that and gave the university notice, did it at the end of the season and not in February like some people, but did it in December, giving Washington plenty of time to try to find a replacement for such a legendary head coach, one that made them relevant nationally and at the level of Pac-12 conference play. Washington decided to just promote Jimmy Lake, who was defensive coordinator for the Huskies for the previous few seasons under Chris Petersen, promote him from defensive coordinator to head coach. And we said at the beginning of this video that unless you're a Washington fan or maybe a die-hard college football fan like myself, you might not know who Jimmy Lake is. He was not a big-name hire. He was not a guy that came from another school. He was not a previous head coach anywhere. He had no previous head coaching experience at any capacity. But one thing that Jimmy Lake does bring to the table for Washington is that he has tons of NFL coaching experience. And like we mentioned previously with Carl Durrell getting hired at Colorado, another Pac-12 school, anytime you can get a coach into your program that has NFL coaching experience in any capacity, whether it's a head coach or as just a position coach or assistant coach, whatever it may be, that goes a long way for those players. It goes a long way for that player, and goes a long way for building a program. The NFL, way different than the college ranks, way more difficult, in my opinion, than the college ranks. Obviously, pro versus college. And when you get a coach in there that has coached some elite athletes at the next level, that really does benefit your college program. And Jimmy Lake brings plenty of that. He coached defensive backs in the NFL from 2006 to 2011, both with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions. He then moved back to the college ranks, briefly working with the defense at Boise State and then coming over to Washington with Chris Petersen, where he has been the defensive coordinator, whether as a co-defensive coordinator or as the head man, from 2016 to 2019. And if you have watched college football from 2016 to 2019, you will know that Washington has had not just one of the better defenses in the entire Pac-12, but one of the better defenses in the entire nation. That's a major reason they made the college football playoff back in 2016. It's a major reason they have won 2 Pac-12 titles during that span. Think about this. The most points per game that Washington allowed at the end of a season, most points per game they allowed per game in a single season during Jimmy Lake's tenure from 16 to 19 was 19.4 points per game. That's less than 3 touchdowns per game. And that mark came last year in 2019. That mark, which is not bad at all, was good enough for the 15th best mark in the entire country. Washington had the 15th best scoring defense in the entire country last year, and that was their worst mark since Jimmy Lake was working with the defense when he took over back in 2016. And keep in mind, that was also with a very inexperienced defense, a defense that returned just 2 starters. Now, I know returning starters isn't everything, but still, it does go a long way. And when you're looking at a defense that doesn't have that much playing experience, doesn't have that much game experience to do that mark, to be one of the Pac-12's better teams once again, despite having a disappointing 8-5 record, it's pretty dang good. And to me, a pretty dang good hire for the Huskies. When you look at Jimmy Lake going into 2020, you have to ask yourself, what do you expect? You know, Washington had a disappointing 2019 season. You lose one of the greatest head coaches in this recent era. Jimmy Lake obviously having pretty big shoes to fill. When you look at the roster, the first thing that's going to come out to mind is how much Washington loses offensively. They lose their quarterback in Jacob Eason, who transferred from Georgia, started for them last year. I thought he might stick around for one more year. He decided, no, I'm going to take my chances in the NFL. They're going to lose their running back in Salvon Ahmed, who also could have stayed around for one more year, but he decided to take his chances in the NFL, and they lose one of the better tight ends in all of college football in Hunter Bryant, who will be one of the first tight ends taken off the board in this upcoming NFL draft. They also lose some key offensive linemen, so you're going to see a major overhaul, major overload on offense for Washington because they lose so many key pieces. So many key pieces. But the great thing is that they should have a much more experienced defense. And that's kind of scary to think about considering they had the 15th best defense in the country this past season, and that was with a fairly inexperienced one. So the key for Washington is 2020 is not going to be defense because Jimmy Lake, a defensive-minded coach, has thrived defensively the past few years with Washington, is going to have an experienced defense in 2020. It's going to be how quick can the offense get moving. How quick can Jimmy Lake improve this offense, get their offense on track? If they do, they could be a dangerous team in the Pac-12. If they don't, they could just be a mediocre bowl-eligible team this year that could build towards something in 2021 and so on and so forth, 2022 and onwards. That's going to be the key for Jimmy Lake. So a major rebuild coming on offense, not so much on defense, and that's going to be where your defensive coordinator getting promoted to head coach is going to play a major, major role. When you look at the schedule for Washington, they're going to get a very early test. In week 1, they have a home date against Michigan. So right off the bat, you're going to get to see how well this Washington team is prepared, how strong their defense is going to look, how well their offense is going to look. Maybe they're going to come out and surprise a lot of people offensively because they're going up against a Power 5 opponent and a solid one at that out of the Big Ten in Michigan, a team that has not lived up to expectations in the previous years and once again could be another huge make-or-break year for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. They also have very difficult road tests at Oregon, who is going to be by far the favorite to win the Pac-12 this season, at Utah, who, as we know, was one game away from making the college football playoff last season, but once again will have a major overhaul on offense, losing many key pieces. And then at USC, who is going to be a very, very dangerous team, especially offensively in the Pac-12 this year. Graham Harrell and that air raid offense is going to do dangerous things for the Trojans out in California. Washington at USC should be a fun one, watching that type of offense from the Trojans going up against what should be a strong defense from the Huskies. So not an easy slate for Washington. Tough non-conference opponent in Michigan. Tough road games within the conference. The key is going to be how quick can the offense get going. So when you look at this, what do we give this hire? What are we going to grade the hire of Jimmy Lake? Because really, yes, he was hired. He was given the new head coaching job. But it wasn't this major hiring process. It wasn't this major interviewing process. It was pretty well known that as soon as Chris Petersen stepped down, Lake was stepping in. So we give this hire a solid B+. Many might say, no, it deserves an A minus at that. But I like to keep it at a B+. The first thing I will say is I do admire Washington for promoting from within. They didn't feel the pressure to go out and try to find this big name to replace Chris Petersen, a guy that has been so great for so many years. Trying to find someone that's as big as Chris Petersen that can come in, excite the fan base, and try to continue his success. Jimmy Lake can still be that guy. So I admire schools that do promote from within, that recognize the talent that they have within their own program, that recognize the experience they have within their own program. Once again, Lake spent many years coaching in the NFL, coaching defensive backs within the NFL, and thinking, okay, if we promote from within, we can keep maybe the majority of our coaching staff intact. We can keep a lot of players who maybe thought about leaving early, maybe thought about transferring out, keep them within the program. Washington has succeeded for many years under Chris Petersen, and I don't think the administration wanted to see all that fall apart, all that hard work go to waste by maybe saying, okay, we're going to go out and find a brand new head coach from somewhere else. He's going to come in, he's going to scrap all of our coaching staff. We might lose some big-time recruits and some big-time current players. So I admire Washington from promoting from within, and with Jimmy Lake, they can still compete at a high level in the Pac-12. No doubt in my mind they can still compete at a high level in the Pac-12. It might not be right now in 2020, might not be right now, but I would expect the Huskies to get to a bowl game, and I would expect them to compete for the next few years and continue Chris Petersen's success, continue what he started with the Huskies. So a solid B+ hire for Washington, a solid B+ for Jimmy Lake. It very well could turn into an A+ hire if he continues what Chris Petersen started just a few years ago. Washington, he put them back on the map, and I expect nothing less out of Jimmy Lake in the next few years for Washington football. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Stay tuned for more coaching hire analysis. This is so much fun for us, breaking this down, breaking down a little bit of history, but also trying to look early, trying to look ahead to this upcoming 2020 season. It's never too early to do that, and we've still got plenty of more coaches to talk about, so do not miss out on that. Check out everything down in the description below. You do not want to miss out on anything that we have to offer down there as well. And once again, as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.